Today we're going to be making this lonely snowman in Blender, and you will learn the basics of object manipulation, lighting, and movement and rendering in Blender. First thing to do, of course, is to start up Blender, and when you do so, I'm just searching for it on my screen. When you do so, this is what you'll see. This is the splash screen for Blender, so we don't need to worry about anything here. Let's just click off it. We're going to focus mainly on what's happening in this main screen here, and then these right two panels. There is a bunch of stuff up at the top, and we're not going to use any of it for this. So let's just move on. Basically, when you start Blender for the first time, you will have three objects, and those objects are going to be a cube, a camera, and a light, and you can see those on the right hand side in what we have, the scene collection. In the scene collection we have these three things, and if I click on them, they'll highlight them. So right now the cube is highlighted. I can unhighlight it by maybe just clicking somewhere else on the screen in this view, but if I want it back, I can click on the cube, and you know it's highlighted because it has this yellow line sort of around it. I also have a camera, so if I click on that, we'll see it. It's this object over here. And then finally the light, which is here. It's got a little line so that you can see kind of where it is placed in the plane, which we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more, but the business end of it is up here, which is the part that's highlighted. Okay. So this is the basic idea, or the basic thing you get in Blender. Of course, we can't really do anything interesting with just these three objects, so a lot of times we need to add more objects. And there are many different ways to accomplish all the things we're going to be doing here. We're going to work a lot, if we can, with hotkeys. And so let's just start there. I'll click just somewhere randomly so that nothing's selected. And then to add an object in Blender, the hotkey is to have Shift down and press A. And so you'll see I also have a screen recorder on the bottom there that came up with Shift A. And so that'll be displaying hopefully all the key presses that I give. That'll bring up the add menu. We want to add a mesh. So how about instead of just a plane, we add a sphere, and let's use the UV sphere for right now. So I'll just click on that and it will add a UV sphere. You can see it because it's highlighted in yellow, but I can't really see it as an object, and the reason is that it's placed it at the origin, which is indicated by this crosshair with the red and white dashes around it. And so to be able to see it, it's like inside the cube right now. To be able to see it, I need to move it outside the cube. And the hotkey to select move mode is G. So if I press G, you'll see now the outline is white. And if I move the mouse around, I have a sphere that's attached to it that I can move wherever I want. Now, moving this around in three-dimensional space is actually kind of hard to control, I think. And so I like a few other hotkeys, which is once you've pressed G, I can now enter X, Y, or Z, and that will let me move along those axes. So let me press X. What X does is it restricts, no matter how I move the mouse, it's just going to stay on this red line. That's our X-axis. If I press Y, now I'm stuck on the Y-axis, no matter how I move. And then Z, I'm now stuck on the Z-axis, no matter how I move my mouse around. And so that makes it kind of easy for us to control where this ends up. So let's just place this on the Y. And let's say we put it over here and we decide, oh, I don't like that at all. Well, I can either undo with Control Z, or I could have moved it again just by GY and move it around. Also, if I decide oh, I don't really want to move this and I don't want to do anything else, I can right click and it'll just go back to wherever things were before. All right, so GY, I'll move it to where I want it, maybe just to the right side of this cube along the Y-axis. I'll left click, and now I'm done moving it. All right, maybe we want other things. Let's see what else we can add. Remember, the add function is Shift A, or that's the hotkey for adding. How about a cylinder? I'll click a cylinder. You can see it's here now. I can't see it again because it's inside of the cube, but you can see there's this weird interference where I have the face of the cylinder and the face of the cube together, and then also it kind of touches right along this cube. So it's kind of making it at a size that's already the size of the cube. I'll say G to get into move mode, and Z to say I want to move it up. All right. And then the last thing maybe that I want to do is to put in something like, how about a cone? So I'll say A, and then cone. And we haven't put anything along the X yet, so GX lets me move it along the X. To me, it feels like, you know, if I had a cone, maybe I want it like the flat side back against the cube. And the way you do that is to rotate. And it turns out the hotkey for rotation makes a little bit more sense than for moving. It's R. And if I click R, now I have the ability to like kind of flip this thing around. But again, it's like kind of hard to control it in 3 dimensions, I think. And so the same modifiers work. If I press Y, now you can see I'm basically spinning it all the time around the Y axis. If I had pressed Z, I could have like spun it like this, and then I have X, and X lets it rotate around like this. So Y is maybe the one I want if I want to have it with the flat back against the cube. And so how about there? But one thing you'll notice is like I go side to side, and that rotates it. Up and down doesn't really, I mean, it kind of does, but it's the side to side that matters for controlling this rotation. So I'll just rotate it like this. All right, now I have these 3 things. And you know, you can kind of see what I'm looking at, but maybe you'd want to get a different view. So let's talk about how we move around inside of this space. There's 3 basic ways to move. One is rotating the scene. And the way you rotate the scene is you just click somewhere with your wheel. If you have a mouse, you click with the wheel of the mouse and hold it down, and then just move the mouse around, and you can slide the environment around. If you don't happen to have a mouse, that's okay. You can also use these buttons on the right to control this. And so what you can do is I can just click on this that has X, Y, and Z with my left button, and then also move it around. And that lets me also rotate. Okay, something else that you might want to do is get like a closer or farther view of what you're looking at, and that you can do with the mouse wheel. And so if I sort of wheel up, I'll zoom out. If I wheel down, I'll zoom in on the mouse wheel. If you don't have a wheel, that's fine. You have this plus and minus. And what you do is you left click and then slide up or down, depending on whether you want to go in or out. Okay. And then the last thing that maybe you want to do is, you know, we can kind of zoom in and out and we can rotate around, but you'll notice like it's always on the same center point. And sometimes you want to like slide up or down or left and right, and that's called panning. And the way you do this is if you want to do it with, again, a middle mouse button, is that you hold shift, and then with shift held, you use the middle mouse button, and you can just go left and right and up and down. The pan, if you don't have the middle mouse button, is this hand button here. And so if I left click on that, I can go up and down and left and right as well. And that's the basics of navigation within here. And so now that we kind of know how we can look around and get views at what we're interested in, another thing I think to talk about just very quickly is the fact that sometimes we want to look like exactly down. Like if I wanted to look exactly down, I'd have to like do this and like maybe pan around. It seems like a real pain, and that's okay. So there's hotkeys for this. The tilde key, which is usually in the top left of your keyboard, if I press the tilde key, it brings up a menu that lets me select my views. So let's say I wanted to look at the top. I'd press 8, and now it's giving me this like top view with x-axis to the right and the y-axis to the top. I could have also looked from the right if I wanted to. I could have looked from the front if I wanted to. And so we're sort of shifting around. Here's the back view. If you don't want to use the hotkeys, this up here that we use to rotate, so remember I can like do this and rotate. If I just click on one of these little circles, it aligns the view along there. So if I click on the Z, I'll look from the top. If I click on this X, I'll look from the back side of the X. If I click on the X again, it'll flip it to the other side. I can look from below. And so that's an easy way to like align your view if you really want to see a particular direction. Okay, and it uses the X, Y, and Z, and it's like really convenient to be able to do that. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is sort of what we're actually looking at here. So I have some objects in here, and that's fine. And we are seeing them in what's called the solids view. And that's controlled above this thing that we're using to tilt around. There's a bunch of buttons up here. The one that's like a solid sphere is called the solid mode of viewing, let's call it that. That's sort of like the easiest thing I think to work in a lot of times, although there'll be other engine or other ways that we'll work into. Just to like give us an overview, we also have the wireframe. So all of these objects are built out of like vertices connected by wires. If I click on that, that's what we see. Okay, and so there are times where we want to be able to see those vertices that build up these objects, but other times that we don't want to. And something else, again, we can, just to remind you, we don't have to like try to click exactly on these vertices. If we want to pick something, we can just click on it over here. Okay. And then other views we have right here what's called the materials preview view. It gives us the ability to see some of the materials properties of this without having to like really render things if we have something that's very complex. So just be aware it's here. We're not going to really use it too much. And then the last one is the render view, and it's trying to give you an idea of what your objects will look like when it's like finally rendered. If I click on that, it looks pretty similar to what we had before, except it like reflects the light a little bit more realistically than we would otherwise. So if I click on this light, I can like move it around. Again, I press G, and now if you see like I move it around, we have the ability to see the light cast shadows on this dynamically. I'm going to right click to reset to where we were. The way this appears depends on the render engine, and we're not going to talk about it too much, but I do want to point out there's two different render engines, and that's going to get us down to this bottom pane here. In the bottom pane, if I want to think about what my render is going to look like, I can click on this camera tab, which is my render properties, and this tells us like basically how many times we're following where light goes. Let's not worry about these too much, but up at the render engine, there's two basic options for us. There's this EV, which is like what a lot of like high-tech video games up to date have been rendered in using this kind of approach. And then there's cycles, which is like a ray tracing. So we like watch individual pieces of light, and you'll see like it's a little bit noisier because in the viewport we're only watching this go 32 bounces. I could change this if I wanted to like 128. It'll take longer to process any changes, but it'll also give me a little less noise. And then same thing, if I move the light around, I can watch it move, but you'll see it's like kind of grainy because what it's doing is it's watching this light bounce around and it's tracing it out, and so it's a little bit slower. For what we're going to do today, EV's great, and in fact EV's been improved quite a bit, I think, from where it was even when I started. And so let's just work in that instead of cycles. It's going to be faster and easier, although we'll compare renders at the end. If we do something like really complex, there'll be a difference between cycles and EV, but it's not going to be that way today. Okay. So now we know what our views are. We're back onto the EV engine. And now let's make something. I mean, this is fine looking, but it's kind of boring. So let's make something more interesting. I think like a snowman maybe is easy to make, and we can make it look kind of cool. So a snowman basically is going to be a bunch of like spheres stacked on top of each other, and maybe we'll have like a carrot nose that's a cone. So we don't need these other two, the cube and the cylinder. So let's just like go ahead and get rid of those for right now. So two ways to get rid of things, well, maybe three, but hotkey wise, if I click on something and press X, it'll ask me if I want to delete. Sure. The other option is to press the delete key. This is not the back key, but the actual delete key that says DEL on your keyboard, and it just like deletes without asking. All right. We're going to build up this snowman, and we're going to do it by having maybe 3 spheres. And so we don't need this cone, so we can just like get it out of the way if we want. Or maybe I don't even want to see it. And back up here in this that keeps track of what's in my scene, if I click this eyeball, I just won't see it anymore. It's still there, and if I render, I'll still see it, but at least when I'm like moving things around, it's not in my way cluttering things up. Let's build everything at the origin if we can. So I kind of have to get this sphere back to the origin, and like one way you could try to do this is like line it up and select it, press G to move. We're on the y-axis, so Y, and try to like get it in the middle. And I can do a pretty good job, and if you look in the top left, while I'm moving this around, it'll actually kind of tell me where I am. But there's like maybe an easier way, like this is the middle, maybe not. But let's pretend we're like back here again. And I wanted to put it right on the middle. The way to do that is to go to this tab here, this orange sort of blocky thing that says Object Properties. And there it tells me my position. So I'm at 0 on the X and 0 on Z, but I'd like to be at 0 on Y. Well, if I have this selected, guess what? There's a real easy way to do it, is just to select all this and type 0. And now I am at the origin. All right, so now we need to build up this object. And it's like if you build a snowman, like the bottom one is going to be the biggest one and the top one is going to be the smallest one. And so let's make this base a little bigger. There's a couple different ways to do this. One is to use the scaling hotkey. So if I press S, then you'll see like I can scale this up and down. And in fact, if you look on the right hand side, I'll just go way over here. Maybe not. Okay, I'll unclick. If you look at this scale, these numbers are changing as I scale it. And so you might imagine I could also just type in numbers if I wanted to. I can also say while I'm in scale mode that I just want it twice as big. And if I just type a 2 and hit enter, that's what will happen. Now I have a sphere that's twice as big as it used to be. And so let's start there. That seems pretty good. I want another sphere. One way to do that is to go Shift A, add a mesh, add a UV sphere. It adds it in the middle, and so like we kind of need to like move it up so I can see what's going on. We want it to be, let's say 1.5 times as big. So one way I could do that is just to type those numbers in here. So 1.5, 1.5 and 1.5. Right now you can see like I didn't change the Z, so it's this like oblate sphere, and then when I press this in, or oblate top, and now I have a sphere. And then, you know, right now they're sort of like stacked on top of each other. If I wanted to see it at the front again, so it's like a little bit easier to see this, there's the front, and I can see like they're kind of not perfect, right? I think to me, if I moved it up so that it was perfect, it would look kind of silly because you can never really get like when you make a snowman, perfectly balanced spheres like that. And in fact, they probably should be a little bit oblate, but that's okay. We'll make them with spheres for right now. So let's say, you know, there's a little bit like this where they go into each other. That's totally fine. Now I need another sphere. Before we added it with the Shift A, another thing you can do is if I have this sphere highlighted, I can just go copy. So Command C, paste, Command V. And now I have a new sphere. You can see it here. Like one of the sort of quirks is that the first sphere is the one that's still selected. So if I really wanted the second sphere, I can just click on it here. And then G, Z, I don't want it the same size. So let's make it S for scale, but we want it at 1. So I'll just press 1, enter. Kind of interesting, right? 1 sent it back to where it started. So 1, when I press 1, or if I was in scale mode and I pressed, let's say 3, it's not 3, the number down here, it's 3 times as big as it used to be. So if I want to go back to 1, one thing I could do is just like type those all in here. And maybe that's like the easiest thing to do. I don't know, I'll undo that. The other would be to like use scale and watch those numbers and try to get it like down close to 1 and, you know, decide that like, you know, children are the people that like make these things. And so maybe it doesn't have to be perfect at 1. Okay, and then GZ, and now I've got these things sort of like stacked up on top of each other, in part ready to be a snowman. However, What else we might need is its nose and some eyeballs, and so eyeballs are going to be kind of spheres again, and but the nose is going to be this cone. And so let's get back to that. All right, so there's the cone. I want the cone to be like up here somewhere. It's kind of too big for its face, and so guess what we can do? We can scale, and if I scale, I like do this, but like maybe like even if I scale it down, it's kind of too small. I'd like it to be elongated. So same hotkeys. If I'm in scale mode and I press X, now I'm going to scale only along the X, and that gives me this like elongated guy. And then what I can do is I can scale it back down, and now maybe I have something that looks a little bit more like a carrot. Maybe it's like just a little too long. That looks like a pretty good carrot right there. Then I need to get this guy like on the face, and so right now I'm like in free space moving it around, but because I'm looking at the side, I don't really have the ability to move this at X, so it's kind of keeping it along, or move it in and out, which is the Y. Of course, that's still not going to be like right in the center, so let's have a look at the top. No, it is. All right. Not a bad job. And then we can look at the front. The front is going to be along the X-axis, so I could either do what we've done, or I could just click on this X again to remind us what's going on. Hold Shift and middle mouse button to pan up, and yeah, that seems actually like a pretty good spot for this carrot. Now, maybe the light source is just off to the side. Maybe I don't want to rotate it. I don't know. Let's not worry about it too much. We've got a carrot there. I could choose to move it around by rotating it and translating, but I think we're okay. What we need is two eyes. So let's just like copy, paste. We'll get this sphere, and then we'll move this out along the X. We'll scale it down so it's like really small. Yeah, something like that. And then I want this to move over on the Y just a little bit because it needs to be on the side of his head. And then I need it also higher, so G, Z, and then we can kind of move this around. Probably it needs to be a little bit more to the left. And then of course it can't just be floating in front of his face. That's kind of silly. And so we'll move it back until it like goes into his head again. And now we've got this eyeball sort of placed inside of there. Now, I want to have like maybe matching ones. You could try to use the faces of this. You could say like, oh, that's over 1 and 2. But again, remember you have like, we're building around the origin, and this kind of makes my life easy because what I can do is I can just like copy paste this, and then I can change the Y, which is like the offset along the face, to be just positive that amount. And now I've placed one exactly the same distance. And of course, like if you think like, oh, these are children, they're not going to be so perfect, then you could like click on this and just use the regular G and kind of like make it look a little off so that it's wonky. Okay, so now we have two eyes, we have a nose, we have the body, which are the 3 spheres, and you think like, all right, we're done, like that's good, maybe it doesn't look great, we're gonna actually make it look better, but like let's have a look at what it looks like. If you want to get like the final version of this, it's called a render, and it's pretty easy to render. You go to render in the menu and you press render image. And so I'm going to do that. You could have also used the hotkey F12. So render image, there it is. And you think like, what is this? I have this like beautiful snowman with like a nose and some eyeballs and stuff, and I'm looking at like just the bottom part of it. Well, the reason is because we render through the camera. And if we go back to our scene, if I back this up and click on camera, that's the camera. And it's pointing at what we're going to be able to render. And I can actually see that if I go hit tilde and bring this up, you can see one of the views is camera. So I'm going to click on camera, and that's exactly what we rendered, right? Like if I look here inside of this window and I go back and I say, render me something, there it is. That's exactly the same view that was inside that window. So we need to somehow change the camera. All right, so camera needs to like back up so everything will fit in. It probably needs to like look up more. And there's a lot of different ways that one could do this. We're going to see, I guess, two here. So I think like one thing I'll say is like right now we're in camera view mode, and I can get out of camera view mode by going, bringing this up again, and I'll just press 1 instead of clicking, because you'll see there's like a number. So I can just press 1, and now I'm back out of camera mode. When I'm in camera mode, if I try to zoom, I zoom in and out. I'm still like in the camera. Once I start trying to like tilt though, it brings me right back out. Okay, so now I'm out of the camera mode, just so you're aware that that happens. Now, I can back this camera up, but it's not on like really an X and Y, and so I don't know, like to me, I like thinking along the X and Ys. This scene's not super complex, so this camera can kind of be anywhere I want it to be. So let's just go ahead real quick and move this along the Y-axis to 0. And that'll snap us on this grid, and you'll see in just a moment why that's going to make our life easier. So one is I can like, I need to select the camera. I can move back along the x-axis, and that's pretty good. But even better is now like rotation along the z, and the x and the y make a little bit more sense. Like I can use this to line me up and like try to point it at what's going on. But another thing you can do is like these commands all work even when we're looking through the camera. So if I use tilde1, that puts us inside the camera. As long as the camera's sort of still selected, I can use rotation. So here's rotation Z, and you can see I can like look around. And so that also means I can use rotation Y, and that lets me look up and down. And this is why I sort of like being on the axis, because if I was off axis, X and Y would do all sorts of like crazy stuff for the rotation. All right, so let's get out of here. We're still not quite far enough back, so that's a real easy thing to solve. I just move it along the x-axis a little bit, go back and check, and yeah, now we kind of can see everything that we want. Maybe I should like pan up a little bit more by rotating along the y-axis. And now we've got this guy centered, and we're ready to go. If I render this, you'll see that I get everything that's inside of there, and now I have a snowman. And it's like lit. Okay, so what else? Well, something that may bother you about the snowman is that like you can see all these vertices, and there's like not a lot of like snowmen that are shaped with like these hard angular sides. And so let's go ahead and fix that next. The easiest way to do that is just to like click on the object you want to be smooth. Let's call it smooth, because if I right click now, this option comes up, shade smooth. There you go. And it makes this look smooth now. And then we can repeat that with everything else that has vertices that we're interested in. Like this, I can say shade smooth. This I can select, I can say shade smooth. We should probably like take care of the eyeballs, so I'll pan up and zoom in and like, okay, well, maybe all three of these things I really want shaded smooth. So there they go. Now he's got smooth eyes and a smooth carrot and a smooth head. All right, so let's have a look at this real quick. So I'm gonna just render, because I wanna show you something. This is rendered in EVE. Let's have a look at what happens if I try to render this in cycles. So I go to the camera, I say, I'd really like to work in cycles, here it is, and then let's render. And this is gonna ray trace, so it's gonna take a little longer. Corners here, because the cycles are seen like the underlying flat wireframe, actually. And so in this case, it's not doing as good of a job. We can make it do as good of a job, but this is another reason why we're just gonna stick with Eevee. And again, the reason is if I click up here, it's seeing the wireframe. Like smooth, shade smooth doesn't get rid of those vertices. It just changes how we display them. And now I'll go back to this render thing. I'll go to the camera, make sure I'm at camera, and make my renders engine Eevee. Okay, good. So now we have everything smooth. Another problem is that like it's like mildly creepy, because like carrots are usually orange and the eyeballs are kind of like all the same. I don't know, it all kind of looks crazy. So the next thing we want to do is take care of that. So let's start with the carrot because I think it's the most dramatic one we're going to see. If we want to control sort of like the appearance of these things, we do it under the materials property tab, which is this tab down here at the bottom, this sort of like rose colored thing. If I click on that, right now it doesn't have a material associated with it, so it's just like the basic gray thing that you get. What I want to do is make a new material for this nose. It's material 1, but I could I can name this whatever I want. So let's just say it's a carrot. The default now, it didn't used to be this way, but the default is to use nodes, and there's like all these options, and we don't need any of that for right now. We'll use nodes later, but let's click off nodes, and we'll just use this like real simple interface. To change the color, I click on base color, and then I say like, oh, carrots are orange. So there's a nice orange carrot. Now I have an orange material, and like the light's shining on it there, and I can make that look different. So let's go to the roughness, and one thing you can do is I can like click on a value before I'm editing it, and then slide my mouse back and forth, and it'll change that value. So if I make the roughness 0, it's like really shiny. And as you can see, like the little point of light is tiny. And as I increase the roughness, it's going to blur a little bit until we have something that's like totally rough and we don't really see the shininess like off a particular point anymore. So let's make our carrot like maybe just a little shiny. You could do the same with specular and see like how that's like affecting stuff. So maybe there's a good carrot. And just as before, I could like click in and say like, oh, I don't want 0.355, I want 0.3, and change it to like an exact value. You could also have a metallic carrot if you want. And so like, let's click on that real quick. And like metallic makes it sort of like shiny in a different way. I don't know, but maybe we have a mildly metallic carrot. Fine. So now we have a carrot. Good. Eyes. If I remember the song right, the eyes are coal. So we'll make a new material. Let's call it coal. And we don't want nodes again. And coal's black. So let's just like make this either like totally black or like just a little bit dark gray. Okay. Coal's probably pretty shiny. So let's make the roughness pretty low. So something like that. And then we can play with the specular portion. It's not going to do a whole lot. Coal's got a little bit of luster to it, so maybe it's a little metallic. I don't know, but you can see it's really hard on these dark colors to see what's going on with metallic. So maybe something like that looks good. Now I have a coal eye. I want this eye to be coal. And the easiest way to do that is when I'm in the materials menu is take this drop down and just say, give me the coal material. Blam. Perfect. All right, now I got coal. The next thing is I got like the body's snow, and we don't really have it's like, it kind of looks like snow, but let's like make it really look like snow. So let's make a new material that we call snow, and then not nodes. And snow's white, right? And also snow is like really rough. That's like why it's white is because it like it's not like shiny. That kind of looks weird. So let's just make it like super rough. And the specular is not going to do a whole lot at this point, actually. So we can kind of just leave it wherever it was. Okay. And then I'm going to zoom out. We need everything else, the rest of the body to be snow. So I'll click on both of those and say, let it be snow. And now we have, snow. There we go. Now everything is snow. Alles mit Schnee. All right, so there it is. I can render this. And it looks a little bit better. But now like there's like an issue. There's like maybe 2 issues I have with this. One is with the lighting. It's kind of weird to light things in the front and down from below. It turns out that most of the time, there's multiple ways to light stuff, but like when we're looking at figures, and this snowman is a real person, right? So let's treat him like the person that he or she is. And lighting works best coming from about 45 degrees and above when we're doing portraitures. Not always, but that's like a good one to start with. And so we'll move this light around. So we got this G, let's move it along Y a little bit so that we can get to like the 45 degree mark. If you want to see where that would be, of course, we can go back to the object properties. And what we're looking for is the X and the Y to be equal since our snowman's at the origin. And so right around here is 45 degrees. It's below, the light's below the head, which is also not great. So let's move it up a little bit. And this light that we have right now that's 45 degrees and up, this is called the key light. And it's like the main light for our scene. And then maybe we also want this light to not just be like white light. It's not as interesting. What if this was like a snowman during sunset? Well, we can change the light properties by clicking on the little light bulb here, and we can change its color. So I don't know, sunset might be kind of orange, or it might be like purpley or something, or red. But I think maybe let's do, that looks like nice evening light. One thing that you can see is it's like, now I can see this like overall well on the right hand side, but on the left hand side I don't see much. And if I hit render image, especially against the background, it's hard to see what's going on. And so what we need is what's called a fill light. And so we're going to make a new light, and we can do this a couple different ways, but one of them would be to just copy and paste. And now I have this new light here. Let's move it over along the y-axis, and then let's also move it along x. Of course, we could have just like moved it to 0, 0, but this doesn't have to be so precise. I'm going to lower this a little bit. And we've lost some of the like definition between these two, and that's because like this fill light is too bright. So under the same like light bulb properties, let's just take the power down some and see what happens. So instead of 1,000 watts, let's have this be 100 watts. And now you get the shadow back, but I'm seeing the edge here thanks to this like fill. And so maybe I also don't want it to be the same color because that's kind of silly. What if this was a little bit more that kind of like white light? And to me, that looks pretty good. If I were to look in the render, just to see it, yeah, now I can see like the definition on the far side, but the main like cue for the lighting still is on this like right key light. All right. Let me just bring that up again. The last thing I'd say about this is like, it looks funny because like I got my like snowman person just floating in space, and we don't build snowmen in space, we build them on the ground. And so we need to add one more element to make this kind of look complete. And so I'll just say Shift A to add, and it's a plane. We need to sit on a plane. Scale, because like the ground's going to be really big right now. I can just, one thing I should point out is like, I'm scaling by moving my mouse, like let's say to the side. If I go to the edge of the screen and I want to go big, it's okay. Now my mouse is on the left-hand side. So it just wraps around. And I can make this like plane really huge if I want, like that. Okay, the snowman is like built kind of funny into the ground. And so let's just like lower the ground a little bit so it looks like we built him onto the ground, like that. All right. And now if I were to render this, I would get something that looks a little bit nicer, like it's a snowman and it's sitting on the ground. Not bad. I'd say it looks pretty good. It's kind of weird to have like the snowman pointed straight at the camera, if you ask me. And so like one of the things we could do is try to fix that. So let's just go look at the top. We're going to do two more things and then we'll be done. One is like, let's say I wanted to like change all these things somehow. So I'll just like select all that. I don't need the plane actually. So like maybe it's hard to figure out how to not select the plane. So just like before, let's just not show it. So here's everything that it goes into the snowman. We can make a new collection for the snowman or something like that, but we're not going to worry about that today. Instead, I'm just going to rotate all this kind of along the Z, like that. And you can see it rotates kind of like the center of mass, so it's not rotating the spheres on the origin, but it's okay if we're not like 100% on the origin. Now, snowman's pointed a little bit to the side. If I render this, I don't have to be looking like where the camera is to get the same rendered image. We saw that before when things didn't really make sense when we tried to render. And now we have a snowman looking off to the side. The shadows is a little bit more interesting. And then you could like play around with exactly how much you'd like this snowman to be like pointed away from you. Maybe something like that looks better. Something else I want to say is like the plane is hidden, but when we render, it shows up. And I think I had mentioned that that would happen before. Okay, that looks pretty good. The last thing I want to say is like, this is kind of nice, but maybe we can tell a better story just by where we put the camera. So lighting's good, makes sense to us, but you know, like think about that render. I'll just render it again, I guess. Here's that rendered image. And it's just like, I'm looking at a snowman. It kind of tells a story, but maybe like a better story would be looking from above at this like lonely snowman, really just, you know, waiting for a child to come along and play with them. So here's a snowman isolated, sitting by themselves, small, just kind of like in a plane of nothingness. Wouldn't it be nice if we could like render the image from up here? Well, we could do that. We can move the camera, and you might be thinking like, oh, it's going to be painful. I got to move the camera like up here and over here and like pan it back down. But don't worry, Blender's got you covered. If I go to this view, I can go to align view, and then I can say align camera to view. So however I'm looking down, that's where the camera is going to get moved to. And now there's the camera looking at this like lonely snowman, and then I can say render and render image, and there he is. And something kind of interesting happened. I wasn't anticipating this, but let's talk about this now. Like there's this plane, and then it sort of like stops. And what's the deal with that? And the issue with this is that like to save time, I mean Blender can't render out to infinity, so it has to like somehow know how far out it's going to look to draw the scene. And that's done as a property of the camera that we're looking at. And so if I click on camera, I can select this down here for the property view for the camera, and then I have this clip start and clip end. So it's only drawing out to 100 meters. Like let's say I drew this out to 200 meters. Now I can see this whole plane. And now if I were to render this, I'll get a snowman sitting inside of a plane, and you might notice it took slightly longer to figure out what's going on. But now, you know, maybe I have a story that's a little bit different than just like the face-on portraiture of a snowman. Now I have a snowman just sitting out here waiting for things to happen to them. Maybe, I don't know. But whatever story you want to tell yourself about the snowman, that is all we're going to do today.